This episode is brought to you by MGM Plus. From and its Horrors returns for season 4, centered around a town that traps all those who enter. Terrifying creatures that come out at night. Horrors some wished had stayed buried. Where desperate hope leads to darker truths. Dangerous new arrivals, a sinister figure, a shocking revelation. From season 4 premieres April 19th on MGM Plus. Some doors should remain closed.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Excuse me, taxi.
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
And moments ago, I said, never go to HR. Just never go to HR. And then, yes, I'll lower the mic. And then I thought of the times I'm aware of people going to HR and things that happen. Let me tell you this story. See if you can relate to this. See if you have any experiences with HR. The good news is that 90% of Americans work in a place with fewer than 10 employees. There's no HR. But at the other places, Amazon, IBM, Apple, Amazon, there's plenty of HR. Never go to HR. It's a honey trap. It's to convince you that you can go someplace and share your feelings, and it's not true. It is a direct conduit from you to upper management, and it goes on your permanent record. You can get your permanent record. You know that? You can get, when they threatened you in school and they said, this will go on your permanent record if you do that again. I will tell you what's on your permanent record. You want to know? In a second. HR. These are my favorite stories about HR. First story. When I was young and stupid, I was having trouble with a coworker years ago. I was having trouble with a coworker, and we're not talking about, it was a high-level job. I was a vice president level job, and I was dealing with another vice president. And after I worked at this particular place, and I'll tell you this story, but the way to deal with two idiots not getting along, I worked for a man named Ed McLaughlin. He was president of the ABC radio networks. I worked for Ed for 5 years. He was a great boss. I've been really a lucky man. I've had terrific leaders. I've never had a total a-hole boss except once, but only once. It's pretty good. Anyway, so I didn't get along with his finance guy. I'll never get along with a finance guy because a finance guy does what? He gives me bumpers. He gives me rules. Do I need rules? Walter Sterling, do I need rules? No, I know what to do. And if you just do what I say, everything will be fine. Have you ever had that thought in your mind? Okay, that's a suicide thought in a corporation. Whatever they want is fine. Yes, terrific. Well, I was having trouble with this other guy. And Ed McLaughlin, who went on to syndicate Rush Limbaugh, he found Rush Limbaugh in Sacramento, pulled him out of Sacramento, and started the syndication here at on this network. In fact, every station on this network practically had Rush Limbaugh, but it started in New York. He actually started his show in New York. 100,000 a year, by the way. And Ed was an expansive, big, brilliant man. And he knew I was having trouble with the finance guy, and he knew the finance guy was having trouble with me. This was his HR. You ready? This, at the ABC radio networks, this is how the man who discovered and syndicated Rush Limbaugh solved his HR problem. He brought the two of us into his office. We both think we're right. We both think we're brilliant. We both think we have powerful and important jobs. And then we sit there in front of Ed like 8-year-olds. And he looks at the two of us, and I figured he was going to say, well, now, Walter, what are your feelings? Stupid. Bill, what are your, Bill Battison, what are your feelings, Bill? What are your feelings? I thought that's what he was going to say. How are your cats? We both had cats. He tried to find some commonality between us. You both have cats, guys. Why don't you talk to each other about your cats, and you'll get along better? That isn't what happened. Ed looks at the two of us geniuses, and this is how you do HR. If there's trouble between colleagues, he looked at the two of us, and goes, I understand you two are not getting along. Figure out how to get along, or I'll fire both of you. End of conversation. There were no feelings. There were no books on diversity. There were no training films on how to get along. Get along, or I'll fire both of you. Bye-bye. We got along. That's how you do it. Ed McLaughlin. Genius. But at an earlier point in my life, I went to the head of HR at a big company. I said, I cannot deal with this guy. Also a finance guy. Perhaps the problem is me. And I said, I just can't deal. All right. One of the people in the department said, Walter, we have somebody who's in this department who's an expert on helping executives get along better. She's good at coming to a consensus, finding a midpoint, all of this corporate crap, they say to me. All right. I go to lunch with her. I will not say her name. I will go to lunch with her. I go to lunch with her. And during the course of lunch at my favorite Chinese restaurant, and by the way, when you and I go to lunch, we're going to a Chinese restaurant. Then we'll get along. You said take me any other kind of restaurant, we're not going to get along. We go to a Chinese restaurant. Oh, what's this? I have ADHD. What's this? Okay, we'll play that more later. Now we go to lunch, and I'm sitting there across from this woman who's a mediator, a professional mediator, helps people get along. I don't know what you call them. A midwife, a corporate an executive midwife. She's trying to give birth to happiness. And we're sitting there, and she's listening to me, and I tell her let's say her name is Suzanne. Not her name, but let's say her name is Suzanne. I tell her every single thing I hated about John. Everything about John that made me nuts, not his name. Everything about John that made me nuts. Just went on and on. I dumped for 90 minutes to this woman because I thought, here's the lesson, that this was my ally. She was my advocate. She was going to help me solve this problem. And then we go back to the office. And a gentleman who works for me comes in my office, shuts the door, and says, do you know who Suzanne is sleeping with? No. John. What? Suzanne's been sleeping with John. No. Well, I had told this woman everything I hated about her lover. Everything. And it's worse than that. It turns out almost every day at lunch, they went to a hotel room and did it. These are high-level people, high-level jerks. But that's who I dumped to. All right, it gets worse. I was very blessed. Maybe this happened to you. I had a high-level secretary, a terrific secretary, world-class secretary, but also very prim and proper. Polite woman who lived in Queens, took care of me and her mother. That was her life. I couldn't have been luckier. I adored this woman. She comes into my office, and I say, do you know who Suzanne is sleeping with? Do you know who John is sleeping with every day? And she looks at me and she goes, oh, Walter, everybody knows that. Oh, my God. And that was my beginning, middle, and end period of trying to use HR for my advantage. Idiot. What an idiot I was. But you have to remember that people who do not fantasize about doing their career while they were in high school are corruptible. If you're a fireman, you dreamt of being a fireman your whole life. Not corruptible. If you're a disc jockey, if you're a doctor, if you're an airline pilot, no airline pilot, I mean, yeah, I guess some drug runners, but mostly no commercial airline pilot, no military pilot is corruptible because they got to be a pilot. They're not going to do anything to screw up being a pilot. They would never do that. They would lose 90% of their identity. But nobody in high school says, you know what I want? I really want to be the head of HR at a really good, solid mid-cap company, at a mid-cap company. That's what I want. And therefore, they're corruptible. And I'll give you a couple examples. Here's my favorite example. There was at a big media company, there was a head of HR, and he had the right to a limousine. The limousine took him home from Manhattan to Cherry Hill. That's a long haul every night. And he had a good driver. Everybody loved his driver. And then one Friday night, he was not going home to Cherry Hill. And what he should have done is said to his driver, I'm going to stay in the city tonight, take Friday night off, enjoy the night. That's what he should have done. Instead, he said to his driver, would you take this package home for me? Would you take this home to Cherry Hill for me? I'd really appreciate it. I need it this weekend. It was a case of wine or two that he stole from the corporate cafeteria, from the executive dining room that he stole, and he gave it to his driver to take home for him on a Friday night. Needless to say, that driver was not happy about this, made the appropriate noise, and that was the head of that HR guy. That's what I know about HR, people. That is my speech on HR. Did you have HR experiences? They're always fun to listen to. For me, Walter Sterling at 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222. This is The Other Side of Midnight.